If you've been following US politics at all, you're probably familiar with the criticisms being launched at Bernie Sanders. The term Bernie Bro was coined back in 2016 by the Hillary campaign in an attempt to generalize all of Bernie Sanders' supporters as young white men and smear them as sexist. Never mind the fact that Bernie Sanders has built the most diverse coalition of all of the candidates. The reasons Bernie Bros did not support Hillary had absolutely nothing to do with her gender and everything to do with her neoliberal centrist ideology. I can't even count how many times the media has brought up Bernie's aggressive online supporters.
Say one thing bad about Bernie Sanders online anywhere, and strident Sanders supporters may attack you. Multiple targets described to CNN what they call a Sanders swarm, an online army of supporters on Facebook, Twitter, Reddit.
I want to talk about the Bernie Bros. The one thing that connects women on the left and women on the right is the abuse that we have all been subjected to by Bernie Bros. It is by far, of anything I've ever done in my entire life, the most violent, the most misogynistic, the most sexist, the most harmful. My mother has cried over doctored photos Bernie Brothers have sent me, and I'm just one story. He has a real problem.
Hillary Clinton supporters have reported some online harassment from your supporters. You familiar with this?
Hillary Clinton.
You call them Bernie Bros.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say to that?
Yeah, sure. Anybody who supports me who is engaged in sexist attacks is unacceptable. I don't want that support.
It doesn't matter how many times Bernie comes out and denounces inappropriate behavior from his supporters, the media will continue to bring it up. And they will continue to fearmonger about socialism and call Bernie Sanders an extremist, because they have nothing else. And many of my favorite political commentators have pointed out that this behavior is not unique to Bernie Sanders' campaign.
What this argument basically boils down to is, I said things about Bernie Sanders that people took issue with, and people were mean to me on Twitter. Okay, I mean, I don't know what to tell you. I have a YouTube show. I've criticized Tulsi Gabbard, Andrew Yang, Marianne Williamson, and I've also gotten backlash, but that's just part of politics. If you can't take the heat, get out of the kitchen. I mean, what are you doing? And he says that, Bernie supporters are basically harassing people. But first and foremost, I think that you are embellishing. And second of all, even if there were a couple of outliers who were harassing you, do you really think that it's appropriate to generalize about the totality of Bernie Sanders' base of support? Of course not. That's irrational. The arguments that you all use in mainstream media collectively against Bernie Sanders, it's all dog shit. It comes from the views of people who are elitist, who are comfortable, who have millions upon millions of dollars, who don't actually want to change the status quo. So what you view as basically harassment, what it actually is probably people who are just passionate telling you, no, you're wrong, here's why you're wrong. And anytime there is a passionate support base around a candidate, this is basically how they're characterized, as hostile. But Bernie supporters are not hostile. In fact, in 2016, contrary to popular belief, Bernie supporters were less hostile than Hillary supporters. So, I mean, you can't say with a straight face that this is an issue that is unique to Bernie Sanders, even if Hillary Clinton likes to make it seem like there's this negative, hyper-masculine culture around him. I mean, most of the people supporting Bernie Sanders are incredibly diverse, and we'll get to that.
So Elizabeth Warren decided to jump in on the smear campaign against Bernie and his supporters, and she concern trolled about, the Bernie Bros online. Watch.
Do you feel, and you're someone who's actually come under that attack before, back in Iowa, back in January, do you feel like he's done enough to condemn the culture online that stems from his movement?
I've said before that we are all responsible for what our supporters do. And I think Bernie has a lot of questions to answer here.
Bernie has a lot of questions to answer here. Oh, does he? Bernie Sanders has apologized and basically disowned and disavowed anybody who's part of his campaign that does messed up stuff. But this is what's happening. People are weaponizing things, trying to take down Bernie, and it's so weak. They have nothing on the guy, so what they go to is, oh my God, the supporters. Oh my God, the Bernie Bros. Oh my God, they're so rude online. They're so mean online. They really think it's like the end of the world. I've seen so many stories on this, especially in corporate media, all these articles about, oh my God, they're so mean, and it's like, bro, welcome to the internet. It's always a shit show, man. People are always viciously going after you and saying things that are not true, and like that's what happens. It's not unique to any one individual candidate. For so long, these politicians and corporate media people have gotten away with controlling the narrative, saying whatever they want, and seeing zero feedback. Well, now we got feedback. Now it's more of a democratic national conversation. That's what it is. And people go, hey man, that's wrong. Hey man, this is incorrect. Hey man, you're dumb. And now these people think it's like, they're being oppressed. When no, this is called accountability. If anything, I think the trolling that the Bernie people do is usually more reasonable than the trolling other, candidates' supporters do. And for Elizabeth Warren to concern troll here, man, it's just so sad to see. She's the one who did the fake, oh my God, Bernie's a sexist attack, and then, played the victim when people were tweeting snake emojis at her. Like, no, maybe if you didn't stab your friend in the back and make up a story about him or mischaracterize what he said, maybe they wouldn't tweet it at you. How about that? You ever thought of that?
As they pointed out, this is the nature of the internet. Snarky comments, mean tweets, and threats come from all sides of the political spectrum. I wholeheartedly denounce legitimate harassment, and I won't deny that it does occur, but I think that this has been wildly overblown. I mean, talk about the boy who cried wolf. Any criticism against a centrist candidate is deemed harassment. What's worse, tweeting a rat emoji at Mayor Pete, or proposing a policy that will inevitably deny health coverage to thousands of Americans? According to corporate media, calling someone a corporate shill is unacceptable, but shilling for private health insurance companies is totally reasonable. People are literally dying as a result of our corrupt healthcare system. Have some fucking perspective. Bernie bros are characterized by the media as angry, aggressive, self-righteous extremists. Huh. Where have I heard this before? Oh right, this is the exact same shit people say about vegans. And none of these characterizations are unique to vegans either. When you have the morally correct position, people will whip out every logical fallacy in the book, because you can't argue against facts and logic. Probably the most common of all is the ad hom, also known as shooting the messenger. According to Wikipedia, an ad hominem is a fallacious argumentative strategy whereby genuine discussion of the topic at hand is avoided by instead attacking the character, motive, or other attribute of the person making the argument or persons associated with the argument, rather than attacking the substance of the argument itself. Just as there are no valid arguments against implementing a single-payer healthcare system or taking drastic action on climate change, there is no valid argument against veganism. And just as there is nothing extreme about catching up to the rest of the developed world and providing healthcare and education for our citizens, instead of funding endless wars in the Middle East and cutting taxes for the rich, there is nothing extreme about giving non-human animals the basic right to freedom from exploitation and harm, and eating foods made with plants instead of their flesh and secretions. Anger is a normal human emotion, and it is the appropriate response to injustice. If you're not mad, you don't fully grasp the gravity of the situation. The way we treat animals is a horrific injustice, and vegans, just like Bernie bros, have every right to be angry. Saying that, I considered voting for Bernie Sanders, but then one of his supporters was mean to me, so now I'm gonna vote for someone else, sounds exactly like meat eaters who say, I was considering eating less meat, but then a vegan was mean to me, so now I'm gonna eat a double cheeseburger. Do you see how moronic this is? Vegans are annoying, so fuck animals. Defenders of the status quo feel threatened by social justice movements such as veganism or Bernie Sanders' political revolution. The elites, better described as the predatory class, do not want to give up their power and special privileges. The working class in the US is finally waking up to the fact that much of their struggles are a direct result of the wealthiest 1% buying political influence and making the laws in their favor. Whereas the vegan movement is still in its infancy, so even woke Americans that identify as animal lovers have yet to make the connection that animal suffering is a direct result of their consumer choices. They shame the rich for their greed and selfishness, yet they fail to recognize how selfish it is to value fleeting taste pleasure and convenience over the life of another sentient being. To paraphrase Joaquin Phoenix, a lot of us are made to feel that we champion different causes, but I see commonality. We're all fighting against injustice. I think my fellow Bernie brethren understand that racism, sexism, classism, homophobia, these are all forms of baseless discrimination. And we shouldn't just be fighting one form, but all forms of discrimination. I hope one day you all see speciesism as yet another form of baseless discrimination that is deeply pervasive and morally abhorrent.
Our freedoms and our destinies are tied, and what we need to get to is stop what Ilhan and I have often referred to as like the oppression Olympics. You know, this is not a competition, you know, for who is sinking the fastest. There is no hierarchy of herd. And so what I'm looking for is equitable outrage, inclusive organizing, and our collective upliftment.
Like AOC said, there's no sense in comparison. Who has it worse is not relevant. We should be fighting injustice wherever we see it. Animals are victims of oppression too. Just as Jeff Bezos can live without a third yacht, you can live without bacon. And you'll probably live longer considering processed meat is a class 1 carcinogen. Don't be mad at vegans for pointing out injustice. Be mad at the system that perpetuates it and stop participating in it.
For anyone who accuses us for instituting purity tests, it's called having values.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, nah, no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan, man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me no eat no fish, nah, no meat now.